The glass doors of the corporate tower slid open at exactly 9:07 a.m., and in that single, unforgiving moment, Zayan Mirza knew his life was about to change. The lobby clock loomed above him like a judge, each ticking second louder than the frantic pounding in his chest. His breath was uneven, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes red from a sleepless night that had started in a dimly lit hospital room and ended with him running 3 blocks because the bus never came. The security guard avoided eye contact as Zayan rushed past, as if the entire building already knew what waited for him upstairs. And when the elevator doors closed, reflecting his exhausted face back at him, Zayan whispered a silent apology, not to his boss, not to the company, but to the small boy who had clung to his hand only an hour earlier, begging him not to leave. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of compassion, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Touch. Stories like this matter because they remind us how powerful empathy can be. The office floor was unusually quiet when Zayan stepped out of the elevator, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was tense, heavy, expectant. People glanced up from their screens and then quickly back down, their expressions a mix of sympathy and relief that today they weren't the ones in trouble. Zayan's footsteps felt louder than usual against the polished tiles as he walked toward his desk, where a single white envelope lay waiting. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. He had been late 6 times in 2 months. He had used every excuse, every apology, every ounce of goodwill he had built over 3 years of loyal service. Today was different. Today the CEO himself was in the building. Arman Kaleem, the CEO, was known for 2 things, his brilliant business mind and his absolute intolerance for excuses. He had built the company from the ground up, believing discipline was the backbone of success. Employees admired him, but they also feared him. And as Zayan stood frozen near his desk, the intercom buzzed with a crisp, emotionless message asking him to come to the executive office immediately. The words felt like a final verdict. The walk to the CEO's office felt longer than usual. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the city below, people moving through their daily routines, unaware that Zayan's world was quietly unraveling. He thought of the mornings he had arrived early, the weekends he had worked late, the projects he had saved from collapse. None of that seemed to matter now. What mattered was punctuality. What mattered was perception. Inside the executive office, Arman Kaleem stood with his back turned, gazing out at the skyline. The room smelled faintly of coffee and expensive cologne. Without turning around, Arman spoke in a calm but firm voice, acknowledging Zayan's repeated lateness and explaining how consistency defined professionalism. He mentioned that rules applied equally to everyone and that exceptions created cracks in the foundation of discipline. Zayan listened in silence, his hands clasped tightly together, knowing that any attempt to explain would sound like another excuse. When Arman finally turned, his expression was stern but not cruel. He slid a document across the desk. Termination, effective immediately. Zayan felt a strange numbness as he signed the paper. It wasn't anger or resentment that filled him, it was fear. Fear of unpaid bills, fear of disappointing his son, fear of not knowing what tomorrow would look like. He thanked Arman quietly, surprising even himself, and walked out with his few belongings packed in a small cardboard box. No one met his eyes as he passed by. By the time he reached the building's entrance, the midday sun was bright and warm, mocking the heaviness in his chest. That afternoon, Zayan returned to the hospital. His 6-year-old son, Ramiz, lay propped up against white pillows, his small frame dwarfed by the bed. A faint smile appeared on Ramiz's face the moment he saw his father. Zayan forced a cheerful expression, hiding the truth behind gentle reassurances. He sat beside the bed, reading stories, helping with homework, and pretending that everything was under control. But when Ramiz fell asleep, Zayan stepped out into the corridor and leaned against the wall, finally allowing silent tears to fall. The fluorescent lights hummed above him as nurses moved briskly from room to room, each carrying stories heavier than his own. Days turned into a routine of job applications in the mornings and hospital visits in the afternoons. Rejections came quickly. Some companies never responded. Others politely declined after interviews once they learned about his need for occasional schedule flexibility. Zayan began taking night shifts at a small delivery warehouse, lifting heavy boxes under harsh lights, his body aching but his determination unbroken. He would finish at dawn, rush home for a quick shower, and then head to the hospital before the day fully awakened. One evening, as the city bathed in the golden hues of sunset, Arman Kaleem found himself stuck in traffic near a quieter part of town. His driver had taken a detour due to construction. As Arman glanced out the window, his attention caught a familiar figure unloading supplies from a van outside a community center. It took him a moment to recognize the slouched shoulders and tired eyes. It was Zayan. Curiosity stirred within him. He instructed the driver to pull over. From a distance, Arman watched as Zayan carried boxes inside, greeted children with gentle smiles, and helped an elderly caretaker arrange chairs. There was no paycheck waiting here, no corporate recognition, no professional obligation. Yet Zayan moved with purpose, as though this place mattered deeply to him. Arman stepped inside quietly, blending into the background. He learned from a volunteer that Zayan had been spending his evenings there for months, organizing donated supplies and tutoring children who couldn't afford extra help. Even after losing his job, Zayan hadn't stopped coming. In fact, he had increased his hours, saying it helped him stay hopeful. The realization struck Arman harder than he expected. He thought about the day he had fired Zayan, the confidence with which he had spoken about discipline and standards. For the first time, he questioned whether leadership required more than just enforcing rules. Perhaps it required understanding the unseen battles people fought beyond office walls. That night, Arman couldn't sleep. Memories of his own childhood surfaced, his father working 2 jobs, the sacrifices made silently. He remembered the one employer who had once given his father a second chance during a difficult time, an act that had changed their family's future. Arman wondered when he had stopped seeing employees as people with lives beyond deadlines. The next morning, Arman returned to the community center alone. He found Zayan helping a young girl with her reading. Sunlight streamed through the open windows, dust particles dancing in the air. There was a calmness in the room that contrasted sharply with the fast-paced corporate world Arman was used to. When Zayan noticed him, surprise flickered across his face, followed by uncertainty. Arman didn't speak immediately. Instead, he observed the quiet dedication in Zayan's actions, the patience in his voice, the kindness that required no audience. Finally, Arman expressed that he had come not as a CEO, but as someone who might have made a decision too quickly. He acknowledged that while rules were important, understanding context was equally vital. He offered Zayan his job back, this time with flexible hours and additional support. Zayan was overwhelmed, gratitude mixed with disbelief as he absorbed the words. For weeks, he had prepared himself for a future built entirely from scratch. Now a door he thought was permanently closed was opening again. But what moved him most wasn't the job offer. It was the recognition of his struggle. From that day forward, the company culture began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. Arman introduced programs supporting employees facing personal challenges, emphasizing empathy alongside accountability. Productivity didn't decline as some had feared. Instead, loyalty and morale grew stronger than ever. Zayan balanced his work and personal life with renewed hope. Ramiz's health gradually improved, and their small apartment filled with laughter once more.